Hello, this is Dr. Jason Munsell. It is about 10:25 on Tuesday, July 8th, 2014. This is the second recorded lecture for the computer-mediated communication class, and it is really the first video on a particular chapter. So we'll be covering chapter 1 today. Hopefully you will read it before this or after this. I mean, because this is online, you can watch this, I guess, whenever, since there's no quizzes or exams per se. Hopefully you have gone through the syllabus by now and watched my little video on the syllabus. Please let me know if you have any questions. Again, I'll be online in the evenings if you want to contact me. A few of you did last night, and I think I got back to you a little late, but I got back to you. Also, I will be putting up the matrix for the emails that you need to be sending me later on today. So again, the only thing that's going to be due this week are the tweets. One tweet from each of you, and I've gotten a lot of you contacting me about the tweets or your Twitter accounts, the Tumblr blog, and an email to me. And again, that's my co-teacher, my teaching assistant, my TA. My DOG is a TA. But if you have any questions about anything regarding the syllabus, please let me know. And if you have any trouble at all doing the Twitter account or setting it up or doing the Tumblr blog, please, again, just let me know. It's really pretty easy, and I have lots of links to help you figure that out. And also, I mentioned last time that if you want your accounts to be private, where I'm the only person following you, that is super cool. I've already had a couple of you ask to do that. And also, remember, you can also Facebook friend me. And the account that I want you to use is Jason Brian Munsell, with my middle name in there, not Jason Munsell. Jason Munsell is my personal account where I say silly stuff about silly things. Okay, so just follow along with me if you want to. You might be just listening to this as we go through the PowerPoint. I'm just going to go through the slides here. There are 17 slides, and I purposely have made the PowerPoint slides as plain as possible because I think it's funny that this is a computer-mediated communication class and I'm making these things very, very plain. So the first, obviously, is just the title. We are looking at the preface here of the book as well as chapter 1. The second slide sort of have this larger idea that's not really in your book, the logic of the spiral and postmodernism. And this is important because it sort of contextualizes our study. And also the other book that I have been using, which is around here someplace, the computer-mediated communication book from years ago. Gosh, I don't know where it is. Talks about the logic of the spiral. Basically, the logic of the spiral is that's our lives now. Nothing is sort of linear per se. It's all sort of back and forth and spirally. And so any sort of sense of this sort of easy sort of narrative, step-by-step thing is not the way things work these days, as you probably know. And the whole idea of postmodernism is just this idea that we, some people will say we're in a postmodernism situation culture. But basically, if you go to the next slide, slide 3, modernism back in the day, in the 19th century and early part of the 20th century, was this idea that there were sort of set ways to do things, sort of set values, whatever you might call it, sort of a universalistic point of view. This is what is moral, this is not what is moral. This is what is right, this is what is not right. This is what it means to be masculine, this is what it means to be feminine. Women should be like this, men should be like this, etc., etc., etc. All that is gone. And so what a lot of folks say is part of all that is fragmenting us as humans. Technology has obviously helped that along. where we've become, and this is part, I think, because of population as well, sort of estranged from one another, and so we actually have to use technology to interact with one another for the most part. But it's just this idea, as I have here, that we instead of going down the hallway to actually talk to somebody person to person, we email them or we call them. Probably calling them is actually too much of a pain, so we just email them or text them. I sometimes my wife is in the other room, and it's just too difficult really to get up and go talk to her, so I just sort of text her. But that's sort of our current situation. And this technology sort of impacts the way we think about ourselves, our how we approach the very notion of time and space and everything like that. There's so many different ways that technology, particularly computer media communication, has impacted the way that we see our social reality, the way the logic that we use to think about things. And so that's sort of important. Our current sort of context is a lot different than it was back in the day. And a lot of folks argue because of all that, we sort of live in an era of simulation or production, sort of the hyper-real, as I have it there. If you've ever watched the old Matrix movie, that's sort of the point, that we are all sort of living in a matrix. But a lot of folks argue that what constitutes our current reality is simply sort of replays of things that we have seen via technology. We sort of are living out what we have learned about what life ought to be via the television shows that we've watched or the things that we've seen on YouTube. I learned twerking from Miley Cyrus, and now that's a very important part of my life. I don't go to work, I go to twerk. But in any case, that's sort of the contextual sort of stuff we're dealing with here. And there's more stuff, I've already talked about that sort of the idea of so-called real reality. I give you an example there from Barry Brummett, who's at the University of Texas in Austin, and in his Rhetoric Popular Culture book, he talks about gangster rap and how particularly white folks oftentimes will see that and think African Americans are that way because look, I see it in rap, which is just complete crap. And so all this sort of notion of the hyper-real and simulation and reproduction is, again, part of this larger postmodern context. Was there ever a real life or a real world? Maybe. But we live in a mediated culture now, and it's what folks like Kenneth Burke would say, once we invented language, we ceased to be animals, I guess. But basically, we're always going to be screwed up, or because of mediation, whether it be language or CMC. Everything's going to be perception. Everything's sort of going to be nothing is purely natural, even as we have bodies, and the bodies do things. So, in my cynical sort of way, how do we deal with all this? How do we try to get back to the human connection, or try to get back to nature? I don't know. As I say here, just go drink a glass of wine. Don't worry about it. Of course, it's 10:30 right now, which would be a really bad idea unless you were on vacation. So this is sort of larger contextual stuff, and maybe it helps you to understand, where we are in our cultural context right now. Another thing that I wanted to add is as we sort of go through all of this throughout the entire course, actually, and I'm also borrowing this from another book, Pierre Bourdieu talks about pillars of intellectual life. And he says as we go through life, we always need to be cognizant of trying to demolish simplistic either-ors. Either-or thinking is very, very problematic, and there's a lot of folks, particularly when it comes to social networking sites or when it comes to CMC, do have this sort of either-or. Some folks say, "Ooh, it's going to bring a utopia. It's going to save everything." And then others say, no, no, I hate it, it's going to lead to the demise of everything. Nah, it's always in the middle. So the middle ground, Aristotle called it, for the golden mean, the in-between. That porridge was too cold, that porridge was too hot, this was just right. It's also known as prudence or moderation. Also, the critique of received ideas, obviously, just never take things at face value. Always question everything, even the book, this book, even this lecture, my PowerPoint, everything. Question everything. That's the idea there, particularly Wikipedia. And freedom with respect to those in power, basically that does not mean to respect those in power, that means to empower yourself. Bourdieu, whatever, was a sort of against that sort of hierarchy. So empower yourselves and figure out how to use CMC to empower yourself. And then respect for the complexity of problems. Things are complex. Part of your education is to get away from any sort of simple cause-effect relationship thinking. I hear all the time that people, that's the idea that, oh, I saw a video on YouTube and then I went out and robbed a bank. There's more things going on there, very obviously. So all problems are multifaceted. And so these are sort of things that you should be sort of thinking about as we go through this entire book. So we've got the context, these intellectual pillars, and moving on to our actual book. Hopefully you've gotten the book by now. If not, please let me know if you can't find it, or if you don't know where the bookstore is, if you don't know where the campus is, if you don't know where the city of Columbia is, please let me know. I will send you a map. Basically, the whole book is a literature review, and what a literature review is a review of the published scholarly research out there. Usually most textbooks that's what they are. But this is what it is. So it's sort of the most recent up-to-date research on computer-mediated communication. Though it does have a bias toward theories that are about interpersonal communication. And so in a lot of ways this book is an interpersonal communication book, but within the CMC situation. And that's not really what I do. It's very social scientific. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a social scientist. I'm a rhetorician, so I do much more humanistic critical work. But nonetheless, that's one of the reasons why I'm giving you those pillars, and I will critique things here and there. In the preface, they say their book is the first of its kind, maybe. It is, I think, the first big lit review book about the most current research on computer-mediated communication as it impacts our personal relationships. I do like that it is theory-based and research-based, and so it tries to debunk the myths of sort of the popular common-sense things that we think about. Which is not always the case. For instance, a lot of folks say we cannot have emotional relationships via CMC, and that's not true according to the research. And then there's, again, theory-based, which they throw tons of theories out there, and it might be helpful if you've already had an interpersonal communication class, but I'll try to explain some of the theories. But they throw tons of stuff out there. And also they say that they show diversity of research, and they organize the whole book from that sort of diverse perspective. Maybe, again, this is a social scientific book. It's not a rhetorical book, so it's not that terribly diverse. But I do like that they are focusing on 4 different factors. If you remember from a basic comm class, the whole old hat communication model, which social scientists really like. On page 11, which is XI, it basically says, this is in the preface, it says here, if I can find it, thus we offer chapters centered on 4 factors. Channel factor, that is the actual channel, so the technology. The process factors, the processes, like relational maintenance. Relational factors, what type of relationship is it, and then task factors, what you're trying to do with all this type of stuff. So I sort of like that. And